Good afternoon, everyone. Great question. Who gets what when supply chains get disrupted? History of asset bubbles past 40 years. Red line danger. UK farmers, Brexit, being blamed as protectionist for trying to be self-sufficient. UK government asking people, please help us harvest the food. And a glimpse at relative food cost across the planet. Looks like Tunisia. Record harvest yet again in the North African New Grow Zone. Bank of America is predicting gold to nearly double to above $3,000 per ounce. And gold is often the most sought-after investment hedge to protect wealth during times of economic uncertainty. With never-ending printing by the Fed, we're fighting an uphill inflationary battle. With this much inflation on the way, only one investment stands out: gold. Patriot Gold Group has no fee-for-life IRAs where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver. At Patriot, you work directly with an owner and avoid paying absurd broker fees. Call today or request a free investment kit. PatriotGoldGroup.com. The link's in the description box below. Starting off here, asset bubble history past 40 years. Even if you lived through the tech bubble, the housing bubble, the asset bubble, that is nothing in comparison to what's about to crash. Fed can keep printing money into infinitum, just means hyperinflation on the way, but eventually that's going to come back to reality, and when it does, that 5 to 10x decrease, hope you protected yourself somehow with real assets. We're going to focus in on the UK for a minute here. EU exports, lamb auction, and as the UK farmers have to deal with Brexit, that $3 billion in EU subsidies is going to be wiped away from the common agricultural policy, meaning that these farmers are going to have a much more difficult time staying in business and providing food into the supply chain, which is already squeezed in so many different places, cuts off because of labor shortages. And if you've been paying attention in the news, you're seeing this happen globally to all agricultural food products. And then right on with the labor, 70 to 80,000 migrant workers that will come in to help hand harvest produce and crops are not going to be there this year. So the response is the new hashtag pickforbritian. Government asking the regular citizen, please help us harvest where the migrant workers won't come in so we have enough food for the country. And if you might ask yourself, how much food does the UK actually produce? Well, a bit over half of what it consumes. So the other 50% needs to be imported, and you'll see the other good 25% of that comes from the EU, and then all the other continents shrinking in size all the way down to Australia. So the UK is becoming incredibly self-sufficient as fast as they can, just like you and I should be getting our own farms, our own land to become more self-sufficient as supply chains constrict, economy goes wild, and why not be more self-sufficient and know where your food's coming from? But oh no, that's being labeled protectionist argument by being self-sufficient. That's insanity in the modern world. And I absolutely agree in that last sentence. We should absolutely be aiming to produce more of what we are good at. And everybody should have that same mind frame for your neighborhoods, your communities, your families, and what you can do around you locally. And you have to ask yourself, what is this going to cost as we move forward? Lamb out of the UK, going to increase in Europe. Other things inbound, though, are going to get more expensive across the entire UK. Now, they used to call this the hunger gap. Anything prior to, let's say, 1850 and further back. From March to early June, the UK used to be known as this hunger gap period when winter root vegetables were not really ripening any longer. Spring fruits and vegetables weren't ready yet, so they were relegated to just eating leaves as these plants were growing. But now we have supply chains, refrigeration, and we're able to get through this quote-unquote hunger gap. And this was a worldwide phenomenon too, but I just picked it out because it was focused on the UK. So what about your local area? If there are no more supermarkets, what would there be the gap in harvesting, storage, new plantings, and then the food availability? And the example, as some places go offline because of cooler conditions and shifting grow season lengths, other places are going to come online. Tunisia, record grain harvest projected yet again due to significant rains far into the edges of the grain belt that now allowed expansion of acreage. Look at the shelf clouds rolling through there. This is just one of many. So their hunger gap's actually shrinking due to better onset of conditions for growing grains and other types of fruits and vegetables. Northern Hemisphere, far north, Canada, etc., going offline. Now, in the perfect world, everything would be in balance and it wouldn't really matter because we'd have all these just-in-time delivery supply chains working seamlessly to bring us everything we need. But as you've seen, there's breaks, kinks, and disruptions across the planet in this well-oiled previous system that used to function. So MIT Sloan, with this article here, who gets what when supply chains get disrupted? So it's basically telling that companies are going to decide who's going to get what equipment, food, manufactured products if they don't have enough for everybody. How are they going to delegate this, or how are they going to decide who gets what? So the real-world case study here, Dell had to raise prices of scarce parts in computers, but what they did was then they offset on cheaper products that had more commonly used price where there was no bottleneck in the supply chain. So think about this and move it over to food for a minute. What kind of foods would be more scarce? What kind of foods would be more plentiful in a certain season that could be delivered more readily to keep this balance of pricing? Now, obviously, continentally, it'll depend on where you are, either more northerly, southerly. But if you're able to trace that supply chain back, you'll get a good idea of how this is going to function moving forward. Because a lot of fruits, vegetables, meats that we used to count on being there from different continental regions are slowly going to be just disappearing, and they'll be replaced with something else. But what would that be? Now, the relative food cost is really important here. This is 2019 for expenditures of food out of your total expenditures. So I looked right up at the top there. Everything that someone would spend in the Philippines per month on consumer expenditure, almost 40% is on food. That is an 8-fold increase with the U.S. there at around 5%. So think about that. People in the Philippines are spending 8 times more on food than they are in the U.S., and just slightly above that, the UK, Canada, Australia, Germany, South Korea, Spain, and then we get right around the 10% mark, and it continues from there. Then you get 20% of expenditure right around Thailand, China. Then we get into 30%, Indonesia, Egypt, and then up at the Philippines. Now, I saw Pakistan was almost 50%, but it's not included in this chart here. So in the US or the UK, even if it doubled and went above 10%, I mean, that wouldn't be the end of the world for most people. But if you're in Egypt, Indonesia, or the Philippines and it doubles, that is, you're spending everything you possibly make on food only. And then if it triples, well, that means the food costs more than you actually make per month. So where do you think the other unrest might start because of food pricing? And to leave you on a highly charged positive note, beautiful purple plasma discharge. And how prepared are you for rising food prices and supply chain disruptions? My Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030, 2-week grab-and-go food crate, or the 4-week food supply. Long-term food storage to help you transition to a more self-sufficient lifestyle. The link's in the description box below, along with all of the links to tonight's stories and images. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.